The lake was never just water to me. It was a mirror, a memory, and a sanctuary. Every morning before the sun fully rose, I would take my rod, walk down the dock, and cast into the still, misty surface. It was the one place where life's noise faded away. But in Greenwood County, peace never lasted long, not with the HOA watching. From the first day I moved into Lakeside community, I noticed the way they looked at me. I wasn't like the others, their pristine cars, their manicured lawns, their forced smiles. I was a man who wore flannel, boots scuffed from work, and hands calloused from more than paperwork. They built their lives on rules. I built mine on patience and persistence, and nothing annoyed them more than seeing me sit by the water, fishing line drifting lazily, as though I had stolen a freedom they couldn't buy. At first, the complaints came quietly. A neighbor muttering, a letter slipped into my mailbox. Fishing is unsightly. We want the lake reserved for aesthetic purposes. Your presence disturbs the harmony of our community. Harmony, that was their word. But to me, it sounded more like control. When I ignored them, the warnings escalated. Official letters with bold stamps, HOA violation, threats of fines, even veiled suggestions that I should find somewhere else to live. But this was my home, and that lake wasn't theirs. It belonged to the land long before their rules were written. One morning, as I sat with a bass tugging gently on my line, I heard footsteps on the dock. Sharp, deliberate. I turned to see her, Margaret Holloway, the HOA president. She was dressed in a striking purple suit, too formal for the quiet lake, holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. "David," she said, her voice sugar with poison beneath. "We've spoken about this." I kept my eyes on the line. Spoken, yes. Agreed, no. Her heels clicked against the wood as she stepped closer. "You're creating a nuisance. The lake is meant for viewing, not exploitation." I reeled in slowly, pulling up a shimmering fish, scales flashing in the morning light. Her eyes narrowed with disgust. "This isn't exploitation," I said evenly. "This is living." She exhaled sharply, scribbled something on her clipboard, and turned. "If you won't respect the rules will handle you." I watched her go, the threat hanging in the air like a storm cloud. The next weeks were filled with tension. Margaret and her board staged petty battles, trash left on my lawn, false reports filed with the county about noise violations, even calling the police once, claiming I was loitering on my own dock. But I endured. Fishing was my quiet rebellion, and each cast into the lake was a reminder that they couldn't bend me. Then one morning, the air smelled wrong, sour, chemical. I walked down to the dock and froze. The lake was no longer the living mirror I had known. The surface was tinged neon green, slick with algae, rippling with something unnatural. And beneath the waterline floated death, fish, dozens of them, bobbing. Lifeless, their eyes clouded, their mouths gasping at nothing. The sight hollowed me. My sanctuary had been desecrated. I knelt, touching the water. It burned faintly against my fingertips. My heart sank with a sick realization. This wasn't nature. This was sabotage. The HOA had done it. By the afternoon, the stench was unbearable. Dead fish washed against the banks, piling in grotesque heaps. Neighbors came out, hands over their noses, muttering about the disaster. Margaret appeared again, flanked by 2 board members, her expression fixed in false shock. "Oh dear," she said loudly, ensuring the gathering crowd heard. "It seems the lake is ruined." Ruined. That word so casual, as if the death of a living ecosystem was a minor inconvenience. She turned to me, voice sharp. "This is why we said fishing was harmful. You brought this upon us." The audacity made my blood boil. "Me? I didn't poison this lake." Her lips curved into a tight smile. "Prove it," the crowd murmured. Some believed her. Others glanced at me with doubt. That was her trick, plant suspicion, sow division, let the burden of proof crush her enemies. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared out at the darkened water, the smell of decay seeping through the walls. Rage simmered, but beneath it something stronger took root. Determination. If the HOA thought they could break me by killing the lake, they didn't understand what they'd unleashed. Because I knew something they had overlooked. Something so vital, so devastating that it would turn their victory into ash. The lake wasn't just for fishing. It was the community's water supply. Every home in Lakeside community, every glass poured, every shower taken, every lawn sprinkled. It all came from pumps connected directly to the lake. For years, they prided themselves on self-sustainability, cutting ties with the county's water grid to save money and boast about independence. But in their arrogance, they had poisoned the very source of their survival, and soon they would feel it. The first signs came days later. Complaints of foul-smelling tap water, residents holding glasses of cloudy liquid, frowning, gagging, calls to plumbers, to water testers, to the county. Panic spread like wildfire when the truth emerged. Toxins in the supply, traced back to the lake. Meetings were called. Residents demanded answers. And in those tense gatherings, all eyes turned to Margaret and her board. The whispers grew louder, the doubt harder to ignore. Still, Margaret tried to spin it. This is temporary, likely natural. Algae blooms occur all the time, but science didn't lie. Independent testing confirmed the presence of herbicides, chemicals not found naturally in the lake. Someone had poisoned it deliberately. Neighbors started asking questions. Accusations flew. And slowly, suspicion began to circle back to the very people who claimed control over everything. The HOA board. For me, it was a grim kind of justice. I didn't need to lift a finger. They had destroyed themselves with their own arrogance. Yet justice wasn't enough. I wanted truth, proof. I wanted the world to know exactly who had poisoned the water. So I started digging. I traced supply orders. I checked delivery records. And one evening, under the cover of darkness, I saw it with my own eyes, 2 men unloading unmarked. Barrels near the maintenance shed by the lake. The same shed the HOA controlled. They thought no one was watching. But I was. And I knew then this wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The night I saw those barrels, everything clicked into place. The poisoning wasn't an accident. It wasn't nature. It wasn't me. It was them, the HOA board, led by Margaret, making sure their control reached even the lake's depths. They wanted silence. They wanted obedience, and they were willing to kill an entire ecosystem to get it. But what they didn't know was that their arrogance had already set a clock ticking. Poisoning the lake hadn't just stopped me from fishing. It had infected every drop of water that flowed into their homes. And the more they tried to hide it, the more it festered beneath the surface, waiting to explode. The first cracks appeared at the emergency HOA meeting. I was there, sitting quietly at the back of the hall, while Margaret stood at the front, trying to reassure the panicked residents. "Please," she said, her voice brittle, "this is being handled. We've contacted specialists. Everything will return to normal in due time." But the room wasn't convinced. Mothers held up baby bottles filled with cloudy water. Fathers demanded refunds on the inflated HOA fees they'd been paying. Elderly neighbors clutched at their stomachs, complaining of nausea, of rashes, of sickness that had started the very week the lake turned green. "This isn't natural," one man shouted. "This is poison!" The word echoed through the hall, heavy and undeniable. Margaret tried to keep her composure, but I saw the flicker of fear in her eyes. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't raise my voice. "I didn't need to. I told you all weeks ago," I said evenly. "The lake didn't just die. It was killed. Someone put chemicals in it. Someone who had access. Someone who wanted the fish gone." A silence fell. Every gaze turned toward the board members lined up beside Margaret. They shifted uncomfortably, faces paling under the weight of suspicion. Margaret tried to regain control. "This man has been defiant from the start. He's trying to distract from his own damage. Fishing ruins ecosystems. He's the reason we're here." Her words cracked like a whip, but they didn't sting. Not anymore. Because the evidence was building, and the truth was seeping through the cracks in her facade. The county soon stepped in. Inspectors came, water samples were taken, and the results were damning. Traces of industrial herbicides, the kind used for large-scale vegetation control, were found at concentrations high enough to wipe out aquatic life. And those same chemicals were now flowing through every pipe in the community. When the county officials asked who had authorized maintenance near the lake, only one signature appeared on the work order: Margaret Holloway. The walls were closing in. Still, Margaret fought like a cornered animal. She called emergency contractors, tried to drain and flush the water system, even attempted to blame neighboring farms for runoff, but every move only deepened the hole. she dug. And the residents, once blindly obedient, began to turn on her with fury. I remember the night it all came to a head. Another HOA meeting, but this one was different. The air buzzed with anger. People shouted, demanded answers, waved their water bills and medical reports in Margaret's face. Finally, one man stood up and said what everyone was thinking. "You poisoned us." The words hung in the air, undeniable. Margaret's face crumbled. Her carefully crafted image shattered, and for the first time I saw her without the mask of control, just fear. But justice wasn't just about watching her fall. It was about making sure the whole story was known. So I stood, holding up photographs, taken with my own hands, of the barrels by the shed, of the men unloading them, of the labels half scrubbed off, but still legible enough to trace. The room gasped. The evidence was irrefutable. Margaret's voice broke as she tried to speak. This was for the good of the community. We couldn't have him. Her eyes darted to me, filled with venom and desperation. Ruining our lake with his fishing. The words sounded hollow, pathetic against the backdrop of her crime. The board members resigned that night, one by one, distancing themselves from her. And Margaret, once the queen of Lakeside community, was left alone, drowning in the very poison she had unleashed. The county stripped the HOA of its authority. Control of the lake and the water system was transferred to an independent body, tasked with cleaning and restoring what had been destroyed. It would take years, millions of dollars in repairs, lawsuits, medical bills. But the truth was undeniable now. As for me, I returned to the dock. The lake was quiet, scarred, and empty of life. The water still reeked faintly of chemicals, the surface dull instead of shimmering. But I sat there anyway, rod in hand, line dangling in the poisoned silence. Because for me, it was never just about the fish. It was about defiance, about standing against arrogance and greed, about protecting something pure when others tried to destroy it. In time, the lake would heal. Nature always finds a way. And when it did, I would be there, casting into the water once more, watching the ripples spread, knowing that patience is stronger than power. And as I sat there, I realized something. Margaret thought she had taken my sanctuary from me. But in the end, it was her world that collapsed. She had poisoned the lake to silence me. Instead, she had poisoned herself.